Honored again to have Brother Ajamu here today. He's the International Affairs Coordinator with the Black Left Unity Network, and we're going to be talking about a trade policy that's being considered right now, and the implications that has for workers in general and black workers in particular. So could you start, Ajamu, with just kind of setting the stage in the context of what this agreement is and where it is in the process?
Sure. Very, very important item that's being debated now within the halls of the U.S. Congress. It is a trade agreement, as you referenced, and I know that sounds pretty, perhaps may sound boring or disconnected to many people, but it is something that is deeply connected to the realities of workers. Black workers in particular, in places like Baltimore. So let's talk about this for a second. What's being debated is there's one of the most aggressive and far-reaching so-called free trade agreement being debated. It is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It is an agreement between the U.S. and 11 other nations in the Asian Pacific realm, if you will. But that also includes countries like Peru in South America and Mexico, and is an agreement that is going to open up the markets of these countries for a more intensive penetration of U.S. capital. It is an agreement that is geared toward deepening U.S. Hegemony in Asia. And the political objective of it, primarily, is to attempt to isolate China. Okay, it's going to represent something like 40% of world commerce if it is in fact enacted. But the problem we have is a number of problems. One is it's difficult to generate opposition to this free trade agreement because it's been negotiated in secret. We haven't seen the text. Has been not only negotiated in secret away from from theoretically the representatives of the people in Congress, but even those folks who have been exposed to it have been few and far in between in Congress, and they've been sworn to secrecy. In fact, when they showed them the text, they had to go into a special room. They had to take out their cell phones. And they had to basically sign releases saying they weren't going to talk about it once they came out that room. So when we have these kinds of agreements with those kinds of measures of secrecy, you can almost bet it means that what's in that document is going to be detrimental to all of us. Okay, and that's really what's happening with this free trade agreement. So what Obama is trying to do is to get what they call fast track authority. That allows for the president to complete the negotiations for the treaty, to submit that treaty to Congress with an up or down vote. That is, Congress will have no ability to amend the treaty, to add anything to it. They only would vote up or down on the treaty itself. So what Obama's been trying to do, and the administration for the last few weeks now, is to get that fast track authority. And we've been involved in a pushback against that ability, because if he gets fast track ability, that means that basically the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, will become a reality, and it means the intensification of the exploitation of workers in those countries, primarily in Vietnam, for example, and a continuation of the downward pressure on wages here in this country. So it is an agreement that is not going to be beneficial to anybody who works.
Can you talk about the qualitative impact, different impact it's going to have on the African American community?
Well, it's going to have we're talking about Baltimore, for example, and in the piece, I wrote a couple of pieces related to this situation. I talk about the fact that you can't understand the objective material conditions in Baltimore without understanding the evolution of neoliberal capitalism over the last few decades. Because what happened with the turn toward neoliberalism in the late 1970s and the intensification of it in the 1990s was that the African American working class was basically devastated in places like Baltimore and Detroit and other industrial centers where this wave of the exportation of the manufacturing sector impacted all workers, but it had a particularly devastating impact on African American workers who were always at the bottom anyway, and whose numbers in terms of participation in those sectors were relatively small. So, with neoliberal policies, you had the impact on the ports in Baltimore. You had the deindustrialization. A number of the companies that were have been historically based in Baltimore, and then you had the rise of poverty in that city. So, neoliberal capitalism, and in which this free trade agreement is a representative of, objectively has to be opposed by black workers. And that's why I argue that opposing TPP, opposing fast track, is in fact a black issue. And black folks need to be involved in fighting this thing and making sure that Obama does not win fast track authority. This week,
Ajamu, can I ask you to explain again neoliberal? Because somebody might say neoliberal, that's new liberal. That sounds good. And it's one of these phrases where it's actually the opposite of what people think it is. So could you describe what neoliberal means when you're talking about policy?
well, when we talk about capitalism, we're talking about a return to a more sort of classical notion of free market capitalism. Going back to the original ideals, theoretically, of Adam Smith and free trade and small government and all of that, leaping back over a long history of political struggle that put some degree of some constraints on the ability of capital to fully exploit everyone and to immiserate everyone in the working class and for poor people. So as a consequence of the economic crisis in the 1970s, there was a move by the part of capitalists to try to restore the rate of surplus value accumulation. The rate of profit had fallen. They wanted to recoup that. And so the strategy that they wanted to employ was to go back to this classical way of doing business, putting the market at the center of everything, removing the state, imposing austerity on the state, not only in the U.S., but internationally. So you have the connection of neoliberal capitalism and what we refer to as globalization. And the result of that was, the transfer of jobs and capital, the dispersal of capital, production methods around the world.
Could you say about the neoliberal concept, as I understand it, has the lifting off of regulation?
Yes.
The trade policy, as I understand, one aspect of it that I read is, can you explain the relationship between multinational corporations to the state government, local government? In other words, the policies that might be put in place to protect workers can be overridden by an agreement like this.
Exactly. One of the most nefarious aspects of the so-called free trade agreement is that there really isn't a whole lot of free trade in the agreement. That the bulk of it is to create conditions in which nation states will be unable to regulate multinational capital, finance capital. They have put in place all kinds of protections for so-called intellectual property. They have put in place provisions that if a state, for example, passes legislation to protect its workers or its environment, if that policy is judged to have the potential of undermining future profits, these multinational corporations can sue those governments. So they have this nefarious investor, state investment investor process where states where multinational corporations can sue governments for the loss of profit, even when they have not engaged in any kind of productive activity in that particular state. So, yeah, deregulation is a major part of the neoliberal regime.
And historically, in terms of trade, as we understand it in the history of this country, can you connect the dots between the slave trade and globalization at that time in history and what we're looking at today?
That's a very important question and a big one. I mean, what we're talking about is a certain kind of free trade that took place with the slave trade, and that's why another reason why African American people need to be the most opposed to so-called free trade, because we were victimized by a form of free trade that resulted in the accumulation of capital and the elevation of Europe above everyone else. So the connection is that basically we have different forms of capital and capitalism. The underlying structure remains the same, but the expression of it is different. But it is at the base a system of exploitation, a system that has at the center race and violence and exploitation, and a system that, if we are concerned about the plight of workers and the transformation of the reality of working class people and democracy, we've had to be opposed to neoliberal capitalism and neoliberal capitalist globalization. We've got to name the enemy.
Thank you, Ajamu. We have to take a brief break and we'll be right back. And then I'm going to ask Sharon if she'd want to make a little comment about her experience in Baltimore vis-a-vis the things that Ajamu just said. Stay tuned. You are tuned into the Labor Forum here at WRFG, and Sharon Black from Baltimore is on the phone, and in our studio is Ajamu Baraka, and we are talking really about the impact of this proposed TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, on workers here in the United States, in particular cities such as Baltimore, which has a way majority black population. Sharon, did you have anything that you wanted to either comment or ask Ajamu about this? Because I think it's true that when people hear something about a trade agreement, people think, well, that's way beyond my ken. I don't understand it. But, there's nothing I can do. So how do you see that impacting the people that you work with?
You're right. It always sounds so abstract to folks when they're on the ground just fighting for the basic necessities to even survive. But I was very enlightened by Brother Ajamu's presentation. I wished he could come to Baltimore and give such a presentation and go all around the country because it's so true. And I'll speak very quickly because I don't want to monopolize the time. I learned a lot, and what he said is absolutely accurate. I can name 3 areas. When I first came to Baltimore, I was a GM worker from Newark, Delaware, and GM was slowly scaling back, couldn't get in that plant. But eventually, GM is now closed. The Bethlehem Steel, which was a major employer of both black and white workers, it is closed now. And then you take the docks. My son's former father, who's passed away, was a longshoreman with ILA 333, and that all those forms of employment were the kind of a bulwark for the black community. A lot of wealth was, people had more money in those jobs. Not only that, the Postal Service, which now people know is cut back postal workers, government workers, and now all of that's been destroyed. Baltimore, 1 out of every 4 persons lives in dire poverty. 50% unemployment rate for black youth. Most of the jobs are service jobs, and most of them don't even pay minimum wage. Or they pay minimum wage, but not a livable wage. Johns Hopkins, this big employer, pays less than $15 an hour. So his message, Brother Ajamu's message, really needs to, get out there a lot about this because, that's really impacted by the TPP. And we got to learn a lot about it, and sometimes you get in the trenches and you're just fighting against police terror, and this and that seems direct. But the other stuff about neoliberalism, capitalism, we've got to get that message out. But I thank him for his presentation. I took notes and listened very carefully to it.
About the public sector, Ajamu, could you say a little bit about how neoliberalism crosses over, particularly in regards to privatization and the loss of jobs that Sharon is talking about?
Yeah, one of the tenets of the neoliberal strategy is to basically reduce the public sector, to impose privatization. That is to identify all of the services that have some kind of potential commodified value in the private sector, and to in fact privatize those things. I mean, like for example, you remember here in Atlanta when they they privatized the water system. So anything of value that's within the public domain, the neoliberal strategy is to try to identify those sectors and to take them over. Even things as traditional as, for example, education. Education is a $50 billion market, if you will. And because of all this surplus capital laying around, because they can't really invest and get the kind of return that they're looking for on their money, they're looking for places to invest. So this $50 billion market they're trying to penetrate, and they're penetrating the market by attempting to shift public resources away from investing in education itself, to transferring that to allow the private companies to come in and take over educational services. And so we see all this mass privatization through charter schools and everything else. So this is all part of the neoliberal process, reducing public employment, which has had a devastating impact on black workers, because we know that part of the strategy in the 1970s to expand the black middle class as a counterinsurgency strategy, if you will, was to provide government employment. So the cutback on the public sector has had a devastating impact when you reduce the labor market in the public sector. So all these things are part of the neoliberal process of reducing government, reducing government services, privatization, creating everything. Nothing is sacrosanct. Everything becomes a potential commodity under this kind of system, including air.
So we're moving into an election year next year, and a question that I think we have to look at is traditionally unions support the Democratic Party. And I have seen in my case in the transit union being coming out very strongly against this trade agreement. Can you explain the role of the Democratic Party as an institution and the influence of corporate money, so that we see a President Obama taking a position that's really going against the interests of the base, supposedly, of this party?
Yeah, and this is something that we saw happen over a number of times. Folks might recall what happened of the political fight that took place back in the 1990s under Bill Clinton, when Bill Clinton assumed a very similar kind of role in pushing through the NAFTA, the North America Free Trade Agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. Something that was a complete gift to the corporate sector. He defied his so-called base in the Democratic Party, primarily with the unions. He built a coalition with the Republicans, and they pushed through that piece of legislation. Barack Obama is assuming the same position. You have labor that is pretending to be opposed to it. Some really are in some cases. He has built the same kind of coalition, and they are attempting to push this thing through and push it down the throats of working people here in this country and in Asia. So this is the role of the two corporate parties. I mean, the line between the policies of the Republican Party and the policies of the Democratic Party in terms of economics, there's no real line. Basically, these are two capitalist parties committed to capitalism, and the only thing that may be different is their positions on the role of the state in terms of providing some elementary kinds of services. But we have got to understand that both parties are opposed to us as working people, and we've got to have an organized, autonomous presence in the political process here in this country if we're going to be able to advance our particular interests. We can't wait and allow for the Democrats to speak for us, because they're not going to do it.
So going forward from today with the timeline of this thing, I get the sense it's coming up very quickly. What can people do?
There's going to be, it was passed in the Senate. We fought and we almost were able to defeat it in the Senate, even though we knew that the real fight was going to take place in the House. So there, it was passed in the Senate. It's going to be, there may be a vote as early as this week. So I would ask people to go to the flush the TPP .org website to get more information on the TPP. You can go to the Black Agenda Report to get more information on the petition that we are circulating through that mechanism, because one of the things that the Obama administration was doing, every vote in the House counts. So at one point we had most of the Congressional Black Caucus opposed to TPP because of their base, their social base in their districts. But he's been putting the pressure on the Congressional Black Caucus. And he's been doing it by playing the quote-unquote race card. That is, this is his line. Every American president has had fast-track authority. Why are they denying me that same authority? You know, and he just leave it like that. Well, the conclusion is, well, they don't want to give it to you because you're black. So he's appealing to the to the nationalism of the Congressional Black Caucus, and it seems like it's starting to resonate somewhat. So some of the people on the fence are now wavering in terms of being opposed to an agreement that can only have a detrimental impact on the black workers in their district. So, you know, we have a petition. We're saying, calling on the Congressional Black Caucus not to give in to the pressure of the Obama administration and to stand with the objective interests of their constituents.
Can you give that website again?
Flush the TPP.
.org.
I think so.
Yeah, okay. And you have a long history as a human rights activist. With the few minutes we've got left, can you talk about trade from a human rights perspective, what that should look like?
Well, if there's going to be trade between peoples and trade between nations, it should be trade that's done on the basis of equality, a mutual need. It should be absent of exploitation. It should be done in such a way in which we are respectful of Mother Earth. It should be done in such a way in which the plans of people to develop themselves that may not have a capitalist form that is respected. We have to, so it has to be free trade, it has to be fair trade, trade that objectively address the real needs of the people, and one that does not deplete the earth, destroy the ecosystems, and result in the uneven power of some nations over other nations and other people.
Well, we didn't quite get the squeal out yet, but I hope that everybody's really enjoyed this conversation. I want to thank Sharon Black, who's called in from Baltimore. She is with an organization called the People's Power Assembly. I believe they have a website as well. And of course, here in the studio, Ajamu Baraka. Thank you so much for coming in, Ajamu. We always really appreciate your insight and information.
I'd love to be here.
And again, for our listeners, of course, the Labor Forum will be back again next Monday. I want to encourage folks to attend the assorted many fundraisers that we are having here at WRFG to help us get out of a financial situation. And I want to also make sure that you are aware that the trouble that we've been having with the technology here, with the equipment here, has not anything to do with a failure of us to pay a bill or anything like that. It is definitely a technological question, and we are working hard to fix it and make sure that you always can hear the quality music and the quality information that you can only get on a station like WRFG, which never tries to sell you any of these products that might be coming in. So I want to again say thank you to Ajamu, thank you for Paul, and Subukwe Shakura was our engineer today. Christopher is off, and the whole team here at WRFG Labor Forum, including Ozzy, who does our videos. So you always can see the programs on the Labor Forum YouTube channel. So again, thank you, and we'll be back again next Monday. Bye-bye.